The film opens amidst the vibrant La Tomatina festival in Spain. This annual event is a chaotic tomato-throwing brawl with people drenched in red. MI6 agent Noel Basset was working undercover as a reporter. Her mission was to apprehend Viktor Gradov, a notorious international arms trafficker who was a global fugitive, happened to be attending the event. This operation was a joint MI6 and CIA effort, symbolizing cooperation between America and Britain. As they monitored the teeming crowd, a figure resembling Gradov appeared. They were convinced they'd found their target, but it was all a trap. Gunfight was inevitable. However, the assault on the MI6 and CIA agents was merely a diversion. Meanwhile, Gradov's men successfully hacked into NATO's Echelon satellite system. This sudden attack led to the demise of all agents in the joint clandestine team. Even Noel herself was shot, and the entire operation failed completely. The scene then shifted to Washington, D.C. Here, Will Derringer, a former action movie star, who now served as the President of the United States, was seen. Will was known for his self-confidence, though he couldn't be a bit naive when it came to diplomatic affairs. In London, there was Sam Clarke, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. Sam was known for his discipline, meticulousness, and stern demeanor. He was essentially Will's polar opposite. These two had been bitter rivals for a long time. Will held a grudge because Sam openly supported his opponent during the last election. Sam, on the other hand, believed Will was unfit to be president due to his background as an action movie actor. However, despite their mutual dislike, they must maintain a united front publicly. The nations they led were currently collaborating on developing new security technology. Also, the NATO satellite system breach forces world leaders to take immediate action. Because of these circumstances, Will and Sam were reluctantly compelled to attend a NATO high-level conference in Trieste, Italy together. For the sake of public image and social media optics, their respective advisors suggested they appear amicable. The plan was for them to fly together on Air Force One and present a united front to the press. On the day of departure, they feigned camaraderie. They smiled and waved before boarding the plane. However, inside the cabin, the atmosphere quickly heated up. Will began dredging up the past, including the moment Sam publicly dined with Will's political rival during the campaign. Sam defended himself, arguing that a shared meal did not equate to support. Their debate grew fiercer. Unbeknownst to them, the plane had already been hijacked by a mysterious group. A fake chef managed to seize control of the plane's communication systems. One by one, the presidential guards were neutralized. The situation escalated dramatically when unknown fighter jets brutally attacked the plane. An aerial firefight became unavoidable. As a result of the assault, Air Force One was heavily damaged and caught fire midair. With the situation critical, Will and Sam were forced to parachute out. Before they did, the head of the Presidential Guard informed them that upon landing, they needed to secure themselves in a safe house in Poland. After confirming the two leaders understood, Will and Sam were shoved out of the plane. Moments later, their plane crashed and exploded, taking all remaining passengers with it. Officially, Will and Sam were declared dead. No one was expected to survive the plane's explosion, but somehow they did. Sometime later, Will and Sam crash-landed in the middle of a Belarusian forest. Sam, with his military background, skillfully handled his parachute, while Will, the former actor, was left dangling, his parachute tangled in a tree. As soon as he realized what had happened, Will panicked, desperate to call his wife, but Sam strictly forbade using the phone. He figured their communications were probably tapped, which would instantly give away their location. Sam was convinced they were now targets for a high-level criminal. He then threw his shoe, hitting Will's phone and knocking it to the ground, smashing it. Annoyed but with no other option, Will had to ask Sam for help getting down from the tree. From being bitter enemies, they now had to work together to save themselves. They started walking through the forest with no clear direction. Meanwhile, back in the States, America's Vice President, Elizabeth Kirk, got a promotion. With a change in leadership came a switch in the Echelon security system. Strangely, though, as soon as Kirk logged in, Gradov and his team also managed to hack and fully control the Echelon system. After an exhausting journey, Will and Sam finally stumbled upon a village. A group of young people was inexplicably dancing in the street. This was their chance. They stealthily tried to steal an old car from a villager to escape. Unfortunately, they were caught, leading to a small skirmish. Sam, of course, held his own. Will, on the other hand, relied on the basic fighting skills he'd picked up from his action movie training. But the local youth weren't deterred. They geared up to attack the two presidents with farming tools. Luckily, an older woman, wielding a weapon, appeared and fired it into the air. The unruly locals immediately scattered in fear. Not only that, but this amazing woman also agreed to drive Will and Sam to Warsaw, Poland. Will and Sam hitched a ride, hiding in the back of the woman's truck, smuggled out of the village with a few sheep. Thanks to her, they managed to cross the border safely. Their destination in Warsaw was a CIA safe house. However, their presence was detected by Gradov's forces, who now fully controlled the echelon system. Gradov immediately dispatched his men to hunt down the two world leaders. At the safe house, Will and Sam were greeted by an agent named Marty. He quickly explained the critical situation at NATO, where important documents had been leaked to the public. The two presidents had no idea, having been busy saving their own lives. Suddenly, Gradov's heavily armed men stormed the place. Fortunately, Marty had a stash of weapons they could use to fight back. Marty fought like a true soldier, briefly overwhelming the enemies. But he was still heavily outnumbered, and tragically, he was killed in the battle. Will and Sam briefly escaped through a secret passage in the safe house, but their freedom was short-lived. Gradov's forces quickly captured them. Just as they were cornered and about to be taken away, a police car suddenly sped in, ramming two of Gradov's henchmen. A familiar figure leaped from the car as Sam approached. It was Noel, the MI6 agent they'd thought dead earlier in the film. Before they left, Noel added a final touch, making sure their tracks were covered. The three of them regrouped and began formulating a new strategy. On the way, Noel explained her suspicion of a traitor within NATO's inner circle. She believed their initial mission failed because information was leaked to Gradov. She also revealed Gradov's desperate motive. His son, a young scientist, had died in a NATO attack. Gradov's son was falsely accused of developing dangerous nuclear technology, even though that same technology was now being developed by America. Because of this, Gradov was seeking revenge against the US government. It also came out that Sam and Noel once had a romantic relationship. After digging deeper, their prime suspect for the traitor was Quincy, Prime Minister Sam Clark's personal assistant. Without wasting any more time, they continued their journey, but they needed a vehicle to reach Trieste. Noel came up with an idea. They would hitch a train. They almost missed it, but managed to catch up. However, they couldn't relax inside the train because Gradov's men reappeared, pointing weapons at them. Strangely, a senior IT expert among Gradov's crew suddenly shot his own colleague. Noel immediately reacted, pointing her weapon at the old man. They interrogated the old man, who confessed he was working with Gradov because he had been blackmailed. He didn't agree with Gradov's illogical goals, so he was now siding with the presidents and betraying Gradov to save the world. Unfortunately, due to the gunshot wound, the old man was losing a lot of blood. Before he died, he managed to scribble a code on Will's hand. This code was meant to unlock a secret computer, where they could find out who the traitor within NATO really was. They were determined to continue the mission and find the secret location the old man mentioned. But since Gradov likely knew their current whereabouts, they had to get off the train immediately. Eventually, they reached the old man's hidden hideout. Inside the old building was a giant box containing a computer and other advanced technology. At the same moment, Gradov's forces arrived, surrounding the building, leading to an unavoidable firefight. Sam took charge of engaging the enemy with whatever weapons they could find. Meanwhile, Will and Noel worked to access the data using the code the old man had given them. Once they successfully unlocked it, the traitor's identity was revealed. It wasn't Quincy, but Bradshaw, President Will Derringer's advisor. The situation intensified quickly. Sam found himself overwhelmed, battling Gradov's men alone. At the same time, the giant box holding Will and Noel was suddenly hoisted into the air by Gradov's men's helicopter. Will and Noel frantically tried to open the door, while Sam desperately tried to cut the steel cable connecting the box to the helicopter. Unfortunately, Sam's efforts failed. The box was lifted away. Then the chopper fired a rocket at the building, causing a massive explosion. Tragically, Sam was still inside the burning building. Noel was devastated, believing she had lost the man she loved. But they had to save themselves immediately. Their only option was to jump down. Fortunately, their crazy stunt to jump onto the nearest building didn't cost their lives. The next morning, TV news reported that NATO was on the brink of collapse. Several world leaders intended to withdraw from the alliance, believing NATO was no longer relevant. This sentiment was especially strong after the leaders of two major nations, Will and Sam, were presumed dead due to the plane's security breach. Just then, Will called Vice President Kirk and revealed he was still alive. He also exposed Bradshaw as the traitor. Hearing this, Kirk immediately sent a car to pick up Will and Noel. However, this was all part of Kirk's plan. Brad had merely been a scapegoat. Kirk herself was the true mastermind. Soon after, a limousine came to pick up Will. Inside the limousine, Gradov's henchmen were waiting, weapons drawn. Without a word, a fierce gunfight and brawl erupted. Not long after, Gradov's men came, joining the pursuit. In the middle of the chaos, Sam unexpectedly appeared, driving a fire truck and hitting one of Gradov's men's cars. He had, against all odds, survived the massive explosion. He had managed to jump to an adjacent building just in time. But one of Gradov's goons fired a bullet that nearly blew up the fire truck. The only way for Sam to survive was to jump onto the limousine. Thankfully, he made it. Their struggle wasn't over yet. Other Gradov henchmen were still in pursuit, firing at the car. Fortunately, it was a presidential limousine, equipped with bulletproof glass and various security features. It could even drive safely through fiery explosions. After a tense and fierce battle, Will and Sam managed to neutralize Gradov's forces one by one. Finally, they arrived at the NATO conference just in time. Vice President Kirk was about to announce the decision to disband NATO when Will and Sam burst in like heroes. They stopped her, convincing all the delegates about the critical importance of maintaining NATO as a global defense alliance. If NATO were disbanded, international criminals like Gradov would run rampant, but Kirk wouldn't back down. She stood at the podium, ranting about why NATO needed to be dissolved, claiming the alliance only caused conflict. However, in the middle of her speech, she was suddenly shot. It turns out Kirk was actually betrayed by Gradov, who had been secretly working with her all along. Gradov's grand plan was to blow up the conference room, killing all the attendees in a final act of revenge. Amidst the chaos, Noel burst back onto the scene, immediately jumping into the fight. She helped take down Gradov's henchmen one by one. When Gradov tried to escape using an aerial cable system, Noel swiftly leaped and hung onto the same rope. She then expertly untied the cable, foiling Gradov's escape. But suddenly she was attacked by that same tough-to-kill henchman who seemed to survive everything throughout the film. They duked it out in a brutal duel. Meanwhile, Will and Sam were hot on Gradov's trail, but they had to deal with a bald guy blocking their way. Will and Sam then searched for Gradov, who was hiding somewhere in the building. They soon found him and shot at him. Just as Gradov's firearm ran out of bullets, he suddenly appeared, brandishing a spear gun at Will. He was planning to escape using a helicopter that was prepped and ready, but Will and Sam weren't about to let him go. They took an unexpected course of action. Sam tried to leap onto the helicopter, but tragically, he was struck by Gradov's spear. At the same moment, Will hurled a statue directly into the helicopter's spinning rotor blades, causing a malfunction that led it to a fiery explosion upon impact with the ground. That marked the end of Gradov's life. With that, the mission was over. Will, Sam, and Noel successfully thwarted Gradov's plan to destroy the world. By the end of the film, Will and Sam, who were previously bitter rivals, had become good friends. They were seen chilling out together at a cafe, completely at ease. Outside, reporters were scrambling, desperate to get their photos.